What if I told you that humanity, for all its satellites, artificial intelligence, and technological ambition, is still not even a fully developed civilization? Not because we lack intelligence, not because we lack ideas, but because we still do not control the one thing that truly defines civilizational power: energy. There is a scale used to measure how advanced a civilization really is. It was proposed in 1964 by the Soviet astrophysicist Nikolai Kardashev, and its central idea is surprisingly simple. A civilization can be judged by how much energy it is able to harness and use. Not by the size of its armies, not by its economy, not by how many devices it builds, but by energy. Because energy is everything. It powers cities, industries, communication, transportation, agriculture, computing, medicine, and eventually, space travel itself. If you want to understand how advanced a species really is, you have to ask one question above all others: how much power can it command? Kardashev imagined three main levels. A Type 1 civilization would control the energy of its planet. A Type 2 civilization would control the energy of its star. And a Type 3 civilization would control the energy of an entire galaxy. And humanity is not even at the first level. Right now, we are estimated to be around Type 0.7. That means we are still in an awkward, unstable transition. We are advanced enough to reshape the planet, but not advanced enough to manage it wisely. We consume extraordinary amounts of energy, yet we still depend on fragmented systems, limited storage, polluting fuels, and political competition. We do not truly control Earth's energy. We extract parts of it. We fight over parts of it. We waste enormous amounts of it. A true Type 1 civilization would be very different. It would be able to harness the full range of energy available on its home planet: solar energy from deserts, wind energy from the atmosphere, geothermal energy from deep below the crust, tidal and wave energy from the oceans. Even the immense forces behind storms, volcanic systems, and planetary heat would no longer be seen only as threats. They would become resources. That does not mean a Type 1 world would be magical. It would not be fantasy. It would simply be a civilization that had finally reached planetary maturity. Imagine a world where blackouts are rare or non-existent, where energy can be moved across continents with extreme efficiency, where storage is so advanced that abundance in one region can stabilize shortages in another. Imagine a world where every major energy source is integrated into one intelligent planetary system. That alone would transform civilization. But it goes further than that. A Type 1 civilization would probably understand its planet deeply enough to manage many of its large-scale systems with incredible precision, not in a crude, reckless way, but in a refined and careful one. Climate would no longer be something we merely endure. It would be something we monitor, model, and to some extent stabilize. Droughts might be mitigated before they become disasters. Storm damage could be reduced through predictive infrastructure and atmospheric intervention. Agricultural output could be optimized globally instead of regionally. For the first time, civilization would operate at the same scale as the planet itself. And that changes everything. Today, we still think locally about many global problems. We talk about energy policy, water stress, food supply, climate pressure, and infrastructure resilience as if they were separate issues. But from the perspective of a Type 1 civilization, they are all part of a single planetary equation. That is one of the most important things to understand about the Kardashev scale. It is not just about more energy. It is about higher levels of coordination. Because having access to planetary energy is one thing, using it intelligently is another. And that is why becoming Type 1 is not just a technical challenge, it is a civilizational one. We often imagine the future in terms of inventions: better batteries, better reactors, better AI. better transport. And yes, all of that matters, but technology alone does not create a Type 1 civilization. If humanity remains politically fragmented, strategically short-sighted, and ecologically unstable, then no amount of invention will save us from ourselves. To become Type 1, a civilization must do something much harder than building machines. It must learn to act as one planetary system. That does not mean one government, one culture, or one identity. It means something more fundamental. It means that the major systems of civilization must become coherent enough to function together over the long term. Energy generation, distribution, environmental protection, resource allocation, and technological development must stop working against each other. Right now, we are not there. We still live in a world shaped by competition over scarcity. Many of our most powerful tools are not designed for balance. They are designed for advantage. We still burn through resources as if the planet were infinite. We still treat long-term risks as if they were tomorrow's problem. We still behave like a species that has discovered great power before discovering maturity. That may be why the transition to Type 1 is so important. Some thinkers have suggested that this stage may be one of the most dangerous in the life of any civilization, powerful enough to damage itself, not yet wise enough to stabilize itself, able to alter ecosystems, energy systems, and even the atmosphere, but still vulnerable to internal division, conflict, and collapse. In other words, this may be the stage where many civilizations fail. Before reaching the stars, a species must survive its own adolescence. And maybe that is where we are now. Not primitive, not advanced, transitional. We are powerful enough to imagine planetary civilization, but not yet capable of living as one. We can speak seriously about fusion, orbital industry, artificial intelligence, and Mars colonization, but we still struggle with the basic challenge of sharing one world without destabilizing it. That is why the Kardashev Scale matters. It strips away a lot of our illusions. It reminds us that progress is not just about looking futuristic. It is about whether a civilization has achieved stable command over the physical foundations of its existence. And when you look at humanity through that lens, the picture becomes both humbling and urgent. Because we are closer to Type 1 than we were a century ago, there is no doubt about that. Our energy consumption has increased dramatically. Our science is far more advanced. Our ability to model planetary systems has improved. Our networks are global. Our technologies are becoming more integrated. In some areas, you can already see the outline of a planetary civilization beginning to form. But we are not there yet. Not while energy remains unevenly distributed. Not while environmental stress continues to rise. Not while vast parts of civilization remain exposed to instability. Not while we still depend heavily on systems that are powerful but unsustainable. A true Type 1 civilization would have crossed a threshold we have not yet reached. It would no longer merely react to planetary forces. It would operate in dynamic balance with them. It would not be constantly surprised by the scale of its own vulnerability. It would understand the planet not as a backdrop, but as a system it has finally learned to manage responsibly. And once that happens, the future changes. Because a Type 1 civilization is not the final goal, it is the beginning of something much bigger. Only once a species has stabilized its home planet can it seriously begin to think about expanding beyond it. Space colonization, planetary engineering, large orbital habitats, asteroid mining, and the long-term settlement of other worlds all require more than ambition. They require enormous, stable, reliable energy. Which means that every dream of becoming a multiplanetary species begins here. On Earth, not on Mars, not around Jupiter, not in some distant habitat. Here, before humanity can become a civilization of worlds, it must first become a civilization of one world. And maybe that is the real message hidden inside the Kardashev scale. The future is not only about invention, it is about integration. It is about whether intelligence can become stable enough to scale, whether a species can outgrow its internal chaos before its own power overwhelms it, whether progress can become mature. Because if we ever do become Type 1, then for the first time in our history, Earth will no longer feel like a fragile civilization surrounded by risk. It will feel like a base, a beginning, a home world that has finally learned how to power itself. And beyond that point lies the next great threshold, a civilization that no longer draws power from a planet alone, but from an entire star. That is Type 2. And compared to where we are now, it may seem almost impossible. But then again, so would our world have seemed to those who came before us. For now, though, one fact remains. Humanity is not even Type 1 yet.